So, should pirates own capital ships? Um, if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, if you're betting the farm on just one ship, then my answer to that question is no. But does the Hammerhead count as a capital ship? No, it doesn't. If you look at the Hammerhead quite carefully, none of its components are capital class components. All of its components, its power cores, its shields, weapons, all of that, everything is medium or large. There is nothing that is quote unquote capital class. So there's nothing to really make it a capital ship. Its size is only the same size as a caterpillar. Now, some of the things that some of the members of Scum have said have really stuck with me on this topic, because we've discussed this, I think, multiple times. Whenever these ships come out, there's generally a pretty weighty discussion into, is it a good idea, is it a bad idea? There are three types of jump gate in the Star Citizen universe, or rather there are supposed to be. You know, there's small, medium, and large. Now, for most pirate ships that you see, you would assume that small gates would be available to them. Of course, I'm talking about the Buccaneer, the Herald, and the Cutlass. The real question is, what in CIG's mind is going to be the absolute limit for a small jump gate or wormhole, whatever. We're just going to say jump gates for today, you know, EVE Online reference. And what is the limit of a large jump gate? Because there are three types, and that can limit what ships can get into what systems, not just what systems that they can travel in, but a certain system may only have a small or a medium jump gate, or you might have to go around an entirely large circuitous route to get into a system that otherwise a person with a small or a medium ship can just hop right into. So how the map is going to be defined, what systems are going to be reachable, that is all of things that have yet to be set in stone, including what are the hard limits as to what ships can go through which gates. Now, my assumption, my guess is that because the Caterpillar is about 111 meters and the Hammerhead is about 115, I expect that the Hammerhead is going to be able to fit through medium jump gates. It doesn't have any capital class components. Once again, it's not that big of a ship. There are much bigger ships out there. So even though it does have a shit ton of firepower, I don't think that it's going to be limited to capital class jump gates. Now, the Polaris is a bit of a question mark, because the Polaris does in fact have capital class component. Now, the Polaris is about 155 meters long, so it's not all that much bigger than a Hammerhead. I'd say the Hammerhead roughly about 2/3 the size of a Polaris. So the Polaris, in my mind, qualifies as a capital because it has capital class components. I think that that's a safe bet to make. It is the smallest of the capitals, but it is indeed a capital ship. If the Polaris can only travel through large jump gates, then I would hang a question mark as to whether or not it'd be a good idea to own a Polaris. I would say that there's a lot of upfront features on the Polaris. Its weapon systems, obviously, things that are very powerful. It's got its speed, which is very key. But if it's restricted to only large jump gates, then that kind of makes its path through the universe predictable. And I would say that that makes it risky to own. Often you'll see people, you know, especially when comparing the Polaris to a Hammerhead, you'll see people make comments like, well, if I see Hammerhead and it's a pirate ship, then I'm just going to roll up on it with a Polaris and I'm just going to blow it out of the sky. You know, get wrecked, son. But the truth is that no pirate is going to sit there and just offer battle and just be like, hey, everybody come and get me. And the game is never going to have a button that says spawn the exact ship you need, where you need it, when you need it. You're going to have to go and travel to suitable landing sites and actually pick that ship up, make sure it's geared, armed, fueled, ready to go, fully repaired, all those things, and then take it into battle. And that takes time that the Hammerhead can use to complete whatever it's doing and then escape. Because as a pirate, you're not sitting there waiting to have a set piece battle with every ship that you encounter. You're looking to get the goods and then get out. That's your mission. That's your job. So a capital ship that limits your mobility, that limits your ability to escape a situation or evade pursuit, anything like that, I think that makes it kind of questionable if that's how things shake out. So that's why I kind of look at the Polaris. I like the Polaris. In fact, I love the Polaris. But I'm a little bit worried about what is the limitation on the size of a medium jump gate. Can the Polaris get through that? Polaris is a little bit bigger than a Hammerhead, but it may be that size that crosses the line and means it can only use large jump gates, which limit your options. Now, that doesn't mean the Polaris is a bad ship if it is limited in such a fashion. That doesn't mean it's a terrible ship or it's a ship that you shouldn't own. I mean, I'm speaking strictly of a pirate's point of view. That limitation may prove to be a deal breaker for a lot of people out there. They may look at the situation, they say, I want to have as much freedom of movement as possible. I want to be able to, if I attack somebody, I want to be able to get 2 systems away, and I want to be able to jump through gates that larger capitals can't jump through to help me evade pursuit. That's what I want to be able to do. And if the Polaris doesn't do that for them, they may sit there and go, then I'm not too sure about this ship. Now, if you've got unlimited financial resources, then none of it matters. You can just buy whatever you want and use whatever you want because it doesn't really matter. Everything that size has LTI on it anyways. So just go forth and have fun. However, I'm probably speaking more to the person who looked at the Hammerhead or looked at the Polaris, something like that, and said, you know what, I'm going to just do a big old melt. All my shit, I'm going to melt everything to get that ship or to get this ship. Then these are considerations that you may want to think about. You know, these are things that you may want to, you know, really wrestle with internally and kind of say, hey, you know, is this going to be worth it? And does this limit my options? And so even though I don't really consider the Hammerhead to be a capital, it is firepower wise, it's sort of quasi capital. I mean, I really do like this ship. It is a very powerful ship. It is probably the most powerful of the non-capitals. So in a weird way, mentally, I still kind of think of it as a capital, even though factually I do not consider it to be one. I would say out of those 2 ships, if you're kind of going all in on one ship, I would say that the Hammerhead is probably the safer bet. Now, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, yeah, but if I buy a Hammerhead, then so-and-so said he's going to get a fleet of Retaliators or Polarises or whatever, and he's just going to come after me and blow up my ship. Isn't that true? If you're pirating in such a way that where you are at any given time is completely obvious, and you're willing to sit there at that spot as soon as anyone shows up and you're not using your head and you're just going to say, okay, well, come at me, bros, then yeah, that's true. But there really isn't a button in the game, nor is there ever going to be, that says spawn the exact ship that I need, where I need it, when I need it, in the numbers that I need right now. I mean, that's not going to exist. So it's more a question of, are you offering them opportunities to attack you? Are you sitting there and saying, here I am? More or less, that's going to be what it comes down to. If you're operating smartly and if you're being quick about things and you're not sitting around lingering around a space for too long, then you may end up never having to worry about these things, or it may be something that you encounter extremely rarely. So a ship like the Polaris that is reputed to be quote-unquote blazingly fast might indeed be a pretty damn good ship in that respect, because it's fast. Now, the question of what kind of jump gates it can use can limit its mobility, limit its options to where it can travel and what it can do to a certain extent, or at least make them inconvenient. So that's something that I think you have to kind of watch out for, and something that you need to take into consideration. Alternately, the Hammerhead, even though it isn't a factual capital and more of a quasi-capital on account of its firepower, right now that's kind of how I think of it. If it can indeed travel through medium jump gates, then there's a lot more options there. You still have a heck of a lot of firepower, and it's still one of these ships that is reputed to be fairly quick. So I think it's more a question of how smartly you're going to employ the capital ship. Now, alternately, if you look at an Idris or a Javelin, I think that those are going to be more limited ships, and they're going to be more special occasion ships rather than day in, day out, live in and operate ships. Now, if you have the money to spare to set aside for one of these things for those special occasions, and you're fine with that, then yeah, by all means, if that's what you're going to do, you're going to do it whether or not I tell you it's a good idea or not anyway. But if you're going to bet the farm on a ship, I would say that the Polaris is a bit of a question mark. It's an unknown. I would say the Hammerhead as a quasi-capital is a bit of a safer bet. I expect that the Hammerhead is probably just going to qualify for the medium jump gate, so it's still going to have a lot of options open to it. It's still going to be a fairly quick ship, comparatively speaking. So I think it's going to have the firepower to seal the deal on a lot of ships that would otherwise be very difficult for the classic pirate ships, the Cutlass, the Buccaneer, the Herald to take on. It's going to be a ship that maybe extends your reach because of its firepower, makes it easier to get in on larger cargo ships and disable those engines, disable those shields, disable those weapons very quickly, very surgically, and then help with the operation of stripping that ship of its cargo. But once again, that is something that remains to be seen. So there is an element of a gamble there. So, yeah. In closing, my feelings towards pirates owning capitals are tentative. I would say that the Polaris certainly offers a lot of attractive options. It's not a ship that I think that you can easily discount and just say, no, bad idea. There's a lot of good things on the Polaris. Certainly the capital class torpedoes. It gives you a lot of reach with those weapons in terms of the type of targets that you can take on, though there is the question of you might end up destroying the very thing that you're trying to steal. So there's some question marks with the Polaris. As a quasi-capital, the Hammerhead I think is the safer bet for a pirate. I really, really do. Now I think tomorrow what I'm going to do is I am going to take on the classic pirate ships. I'm talking about the Cutlass, I'm talking about the Buccaneer, and I'm talking about the Herald, because I've been experimenting a lot with the Buccaneer lately, and my feelings towards that ship have somewhat changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for tomorrow's episode. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this one, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.